Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Yahweh's Sabbath day. Greetings to those on the internet. We hope you enjoy the messages that go out. Today's message is going to be on biblical marriage. And there's a lot of things in Scripture that are very confusing and unanswered about the topic of marriage and marriage throughout the history of the Bible. And we're going to go back to the beginning and see the first couple, and then go through a few scriptures throughout history and just highlight some things that are strange about marriage, and then we'll move our way up to the Messianic scriptures and see what it has to say about marriage and the relationship between a man and a woman. I'm going to start off in Genesis chapter 2. Starting in verse 20. And Adam gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a help meet for him. And Yahweh Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which Yahweh Elohim had taken from man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. And a few things that we can highlight here is it says that a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, singular. So we see one man, one woman. And in Genesis chapter 24, I think this is an interesting illustration of a marriage. And today in modern thought, we think that a marriage is when two people, man and a woman, go stand in front of a preacher, and he has them recite some things, and well, that's what marries them. Or we go to the courthouse and sign some paperwork and pay our dues, and then they become married. But neither of these things are found in Scripture as a mode of marriage. In chapter 24 of Genesis, starting in verse 12. Now, Abraham has his servant Eliezer to go find a wife for his son Isaac, and that's in the first part of chapter 24, and we'll pick up in verse 12. And this is the servant speaking. And he said, O Yahweh, Elohim of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, Let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink, and she shall say, Drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac, and thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness unto my master. And it came to pass before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, and neither had any man known her. And she went down to the well, and filled her pitcher, and came up. And the servant ran to meet her, and said, Let me, I pray thee, drink a little water of thy pitcher. And she said, Drink, my sovereign. And she hasted, and let down her pitcher upon her hand, and gave him drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also, until they have done drinking. And she hasted and emptied her pitcher into the trough, and ran again unto the well to draw water, and drew for his camels also. And the man wondering at her held his peace, to wit whether Yahweh had made his journey prosperous or not. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight, and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold, and said, Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? And she said unto him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. She said moreover unto him, We have both straw and provender enough, and room to lodge in. And the man bowed down his head and worshiped Yahweh. And we was talking about this earlier. This man prayed, and Yahweh was, close at hand to intervene and to ensure that his prayer was heard. And he is somebody translated that as 300 gallons of water. And let's just skip down to verse 61 in chapter 24. And this is, we see that Yahweh has brought these two together. He was involved in their coming together in their relationship. And this is the result and the marriage. And starting in verse 61, and Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. And Isaac came from the way of the well Lahoroi, for he dwelt in the south country. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off her camel, for she had said unto the servant, What man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant had said, It is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So here it says he took her into his mother's tent, and she became his wife. We don't see a courthouse hearing. We don't see anybody meeting with the preacher to perform the service. Not saying those things are bad, but that's not a biblical marriage. A biblical marriage is one man, one woman, and Yahweh bringing it together. Now let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 7, and we'll see what Yahweh doesn't condone in a marriage. Well, actually, there's numerous scriptures we can use to see what Yahweh doesn't condone. But we know for a fact by the scriptures, it's a man and a woman. And that's the only two that Yahweh is going to bring together. And if anybody tries to bring anything else together, they can call it what they want to, but that's not a marriage. A man can take a tree to the courthouse and say, I want to marry this tree. But again, it's not a marriage. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, starting in verse 1, When Yahweh thy Elohim shall bring thee into the land, whither thou goest to possess it, and hast cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when Yahweh thy Elohim shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. For they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other mighty ones. So will the anger of Yahweh be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art an holy people unto Yahweh thy Elohim. Yahweh thy Elohim hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So Yahweh didn't want the children of Israel to venture outside and marry into the daughters of the land of the nations, or bring them in, because that would lead them astray, following other deities. And we see a really good illustration of this in 1 Kings chapter 11. And this was actually what divided the nation of Israel. In 1 Kings chapter 11, starting in verse 1. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which Yahweh said unto the children of Israel, You shall not go in to them, neither shall they come in unto you. For surely they will turn away your heart after their mighty ones. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. And it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other mighty ones, and his heart was not perfect with Yahweh his Elohim, as was the heart of David his father. And Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the Elohim of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and went not fully after Yahweh, as David his father. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemoth, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives which burnt incense and sacrificed unto their mighty ones. So a criteria, a principle that we can draw out of this is we don't want to go outside of the faith looking for wives. And for our young people that's in this faith, we would also want to recommend that they not go out. We need to be equally yoked, as Paul talked about in Corinthians. And in Deuteronomy chapter 17, this is what was given, the instructions given for a king, which was also disregarded by Solomon. Deuteronomy chapter 17, starting in verse 14. When thou art come unto the land which Yahweh thy Elohim giveth thee, and shalt possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shall say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me, thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom Yahweh thy Elohim shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as Yahweh hath said unto you, you shall henceforth return no more that way. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. And it shall be, when he sits upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book, out of that which is before the priests and the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear Yahweh his Elohim, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes, to do them, that his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, and that he turn not aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. Now I just pulled out a few illustrations in Scripture, and I'm sure there's a lot more of concerning marriage and things that obviously were part of the custom in ancient Israel, or in the history of man. In Genesis chapter 16, starting in verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold, now Yahweh hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my handmaid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And this is right after the promise given to Abraham. Abraham was given a promise that he would be the father of many nations, and that he would have a son. And what's strange, which is very hard for our minds to grasp, is why would his wife give her handmaid to her husband? That's just strange. And again, that's apparently part of the custom. In chapter 25 of Genesis. Well, actually, let me just finish that verse. It says, And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Yahweh judged between me and thee. We'll also see in Scripture, when some of these strange relationships go on, there's negative consequences that are tied in with those things, not only in the relationships but also in the genealogies of what came out of those relationships. We'll see negative consequences in chapter 25. And while we're on that thought, that principle, if I were to marry a woman not in the faith, and she has things that are against Yahweh's principles in her life, will also see negative consequences as a result of that relationship. Not only, when he says, I'll visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, I don't think that means that he is going to punish the children because of fathers. I think it's because the children inherit things from the father, inherit their sins, act like their fathers acted. In chapter 25, starting in verse 1, Then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran, and Joshshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. And Joshshan begat Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Asherim, and Letushim, and Lumim. And the sons of Midian, Ephah, and Epher, and Hanok, and Abida, and Elda. Where is my reader right now? All these were the children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. So we see that he had children from through concubines as well. This is another thing that is strange. And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but in Genesis chapters 29 and 30, we see the marriage of Jacob to Rachel and Leah. And I'm just going to paraphrase through the story here, but Jacob decides he wants to marry Rachel, and he makes a promise that he would work for her for 7 years. So for 7 years he works for this woman, and then the father slips Leah into the tent And here we see another marriage thing in the tent going on. But he's deceived. He marries, or he becomes one with Leah and finds out that he's been deceived. So then he decides to work another 7 years for the wife that he wanted, which was Rachel. And then they go back and forth about childbearing. One is barren at one point in time. And here again we see another instance of the wives giving the handmaids to the husband to raise up children. So from 4 wives you have the 12 tribes of Israel. Now a lot of people today say that polygamy is sinful, and but one thing that we see in all these stories, nobody is ever rebuked for having more than one wife. Nobody's ever punished. A curse wasn't put up on, well, maybe, some of the negative results from those relationships. And then we'll see some more verses that don't speak against it. And again, this has something to do with ancient culture that my mind just can't grasp. I know that I'm a one-woman man, and I couldn't take on 2 wives. It's just couldn't do it. One is sufficient for me, and I don't understand this. But since we're talking about biblical marriage, I thought we would bring all these things to light just to discuss them. In Exodus 21. And starting in verse 7. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. And if he do not these 3 unto her, then shall she go out free without money. So here we see an instance where it says if a man takes another wife, he cannot diminish these things from his other wife. Food, raiment, duty of marriage, he shall not diminish. In Leviticus 18, and verse 17, and these few verses here I'm just pulling out because they tied in with marriage and they were kind of strange. Leviticus 18 verse 17, thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, neither shalt thou take her son's daughter, or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness, for they are her near kinswoman, it is wickedness. Neither shalt thou take a wife to her sister to vex her, to uncover her nakedness besides the other in her lifetime. So here it's saying don't take wives that are sisters. In Deuteronomy 21, in verse 15, another obscure verse here. If a man have 2 wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be when he make his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength, the right of the firstborn is his. So here we see if a man has two wives, he cannot take away the promise, the inheritance of the firstborn. In chapter 25 of Deuteronomy, starting in verse 5, and this is another strange verse here. If brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother, which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders, and say, my husband's brother refused to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel, he will not perform the duty of the husband's brother. And we see this illustration actually being performed in the story of Tamar in Genesis, somewhere around chapter 40, somewhere in there, and also in Ruth and Boaz. In 2 Samuel, chapter 12. Now, this is after David had sinned with Bathsheba. Nathan the prophet was coming, and he gives an illustration to David to get his point across about the sin that he had just committed. In verse 1, and Yahweh sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him and said unto him, there were two men in one city, the one rich, the other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing save one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and nourished up, and it grew up together with him and with his children. It did eat of his own meat, and drank of his own cup, and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock and of his own herd to dress the wayfaring man that was come unto him, but took the poor man's lamb, and dressed it for the man that was come to him. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man, and he said to Nathan, as Yahweh liveth, the man that hath done this thing shall surely die. And he shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus saith Yahweh Elohim of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house and thy master's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover have given unto thee such and such things. And that was just a strange verse to me, that Yahweh told David that he gave him his master's house and his wives into his bosom. Now let's flip over to Matthew chapter 19. Chapter 19, starting in verse 3. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And I actually heard someone of a different sexual persuasion say that the Messiah never spoke against those things. Well, here out of his own mouth, he says that in the beginning it was male and female. And he said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. So out of the Messiah's own mouth, he's giving his prescription of marriage, which was from the beginning. One man, one woman. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore Elohim hath joined together, let not man put asunder. And there's a key element in there that's easy to miss. What Elohim has joined together. If Yahweh doesn't put it together, it's not a marriage. What Elohim has joined together, let man not put asunder. Verse 7, they say unto him, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And what he's saying is, because of the hardness of your hearts it was allowed, but it was a fault that was in you. But from the beginning that was not the plan. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whosoever marries her that is put away does commit adultery. So from this we can glean that a marriage can only be a marriage if Yahweh puts it together. And if he put it together, the only reason for separation is fornication and adultery. His disciples say unto him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. But he said unto them, all men cannot receive this saying, except they to whom it is given. For there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. So this ties in with some of Paul's words that there are some men that can devote their lives to the kingdom and don't need to be married. And I think Paul talks about having that gift. And let's look at 1 Timothy chapter 3. We're going to close out here in just a couple more references. 1 Timothy chapter 3, starting in verse 1. This is a true saying, if a man desires the office of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that rules well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the assembly of Yahweh? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Also in verse 12 it says, let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own house well. And I've actually heard, people try to pull a lot more, out of this. Someone said that, well, what that really means is he has to have at least one wife, and that he has to have children in order to be an elder, bishop, or deacon. But I think that's a stretch. In Titus chapter 1, Titus 1, and starting in verse 5, And for this cause left I thee in Crete, that thou shouldest set in order the things that are wanting, and ordain elders in every city, as I had appointed thee. If any man be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly, for a bishop must be blameless as the steward of Elohim, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. In Ephesians chapter 5, Ephesians 5 and 21, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of Elohim, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the master. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Messiah is head of the assembly, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the assembly is subject unto Messiah, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Messiah also loved the assembly and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious assembly, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loves himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourish and cherish it, even as the master the assembly. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Messiah and the assembly. Now he's quoting Genesis chapter 2 here, but he's saying that this is a mystery about the Messiah and the assembly. So as a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, it is an allegory of the Messiah leaving his father and mother and cleaving to his assembly, the church. And let's close out in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, starting in verse 1. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Now it's interesting that he says, in an effort to avoid fornication, let everybody have their own spouse. That is the remedy to avoid fornication. Let the husband render unto his wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto her husband. Without being too detailed here, a man is supposed to fulfill a woman's needs, and a woman is supposed to fulfill the man's needs. Verse 4, the wife hath not power over her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one another, means don't stop having those relations, except it be with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again. Why? That Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. And I'm going to just speak a little bit about my personal experience. If and this is kind of a mature discussion here, and probably not suitable for young viewers if anybody is listening to the video here. But if my wife and I aren't coming together, the temptations for the wrong thing and wrong thoughts are stronger. And I'm not sure if anybody can relate, but pornography is a very addictive and poisonous thing that is going on in society. And even thoughts that we shouldn't even think about they attack the mind when a man is not with his wife, and I'm sure I could probably speak for both groups. But the remedy of not being attacked by Satan with those things is being with my wife. And, I talk to these men in prison on the weekends because I can relate. These men don't have their wives with them, and the thoughts and the emotions will drive a man crazy. And what actually makes this worse, and this is for, education of those that might be listening, if you feed those thoughts by looking or feeding into it, it can become an addiction that it's real hard to come out of. So the best way several ways to protect yourself from negative thoughts. One is don't look at things you're not supposed to look at. Perfect illustration, David and Bathsheba. If he would have turned his head and went about his business, he wouldn't have fell into so great of a sin, and actually which ended in murder. So one, guard your eyes. Guard your thoughts. Once you start thinking about things you shouldn't be thinking about, arrest those thoughts. Paul in Corinthians talks about taking your thoughts captive, making your mind obey you. But a very good remedy is to stay with your wife, your one wife. She is there, and the husband is there. And I'll just use the words of Paul here. It says in verse 2, to avoid fornication, have your own spouse. And then also in verse 5, it says, come together that Satan tempt you not. Do not separate from your spouse. And this is talking about having the relations here so that Satan does not tempt you. Verse 6, but I speak this by permission and not of commandment, for I would that all men were even as I myself. But every man has his proper gift. There it is. If you don't have to be married, that is a gift. And that kind of ties in with how the Messiah said that some men are eunuchs for the kingdom. One after this manner and another after that. I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn. Now there's two different ways you can look at that burn. Some say burn in the lake of fire, and some take that as burn in lust. And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the master, let not the wife depart from her husband, and if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. But to the rest speak I, not the master. If any brother hath a wife that believes not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which hath an husband that believe not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but Elohim hath called us to peace. So here we see a third allowance for a separation in marriage. First we saw fornication and adultery, and here we see if the unbelieving departs. Also, I'm just going to quote this in 1 Peter 1:7, it says that a believing wife can win over her husband by her chaste conversation and behavior. But if you have two believers, Yahweh's brought them together. They're one man, one woman for life. Hallelujah.